Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are tuning in from or if you are catching us on replay. This is The Awesome Journey, and I am your host, Kelle 𝒏𝒆𝒚, along with my co-host in care, Christy Howard. And we are just two girls that live on opposite sides of the country, have giving hearts, a passion for paying it forward. And I may have prayed to be living louder in my purpose. And now here we sit in front of microphones, bringing you The Awesome Journey. And today we are actually both in Florida coming live. And we're really excited today because we're taking a little bit of a turn into a world that I love and totally geek out over. Our guest today is Saleem Ahmad. And I hope I said that correctly. I tried on the H, Saleem. I really did.
You did a good effort.
Thank you. A for effort. So for any of you today who, and Saleem is known to be the anti-venture capitalist. So anyone who gets that your attention, or if you are a small business startup who is struggling to raise their first 200 to 300K, if you have time constraints, if you're having trouble connecting with investors, and even more so, if you're having runaway dwindling, this is 100% the show for you. Saleem has some great things to share with what he is doing, really shaking up VC and making a difference. So before we get to Saleem, who is coming to us from Austin, Texas, I do want to say, I do want to turn it over to my co-host in care, Christy Howard, who is just across the house from me.
Yes, I am. Hello. And I have to, Stephanie's here, and no, Stephanie, he's not in jail. Just
No,
so that you
not
know.
motorhome. It just looks like a jail.
Yeah, that's okay.
I do know some VCs that are in jail.
That's true. So anyway, I want to, if there's internet issues, understand that both Kelle and I are here, and you all know that I sometimes have internet issues just on my own. So as usual, bear with us. I'm excited to have Saleem here for the fact that, well, one, I like his personality. He just says it how it is. And we connected that way. But for the fact that he's got on LinkedIn, now Kelle and I have been on LinkedIn for such a long time, but we're seeing some, new people getting on LinkedIn that they've never really dealt with this landscape. And he came in as a job seeker. However, he saw how he could grow his business. And so he's using this landscape for his business. So Saleem, it's all yours. The platform's yours. Share away. Kelle, this is more in Kelle's genre, I would say. So it's probably going to be those two. I'm not going to try to interrupt as much, but I will interrupt with questions or comments.
Love it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate being here. And that is actually a little known fact. I joined LinkedIn about 1.5 years ago as a job seeker. And I stuck around even past my phase of trying to find a job and trying to find a fit in the startup ecosystem. I just saw the power of LinkedIn. And so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now.
That's awesome. So tell us a little bit more about what you're doing now, identifying those issues within the ecosystem and how now you've turned that into a business, a very unique business, I might add, for yourself.
So I've been in the startup ecosystem for about 11 years now. And I kind of stumbled over it because I worked corporate, out of university, worked corporate for a few years, and it was just sucking the life out of me. I couldn't do it anymore. And so I actually went back to school. I didn't have any other options, and I did my master's in business and entrepreneurship. And that was really what broadened my perspective on what startups were and how they can be a tool for getting your mission out there into the world, and a very effective tool at that. So since then, I've pretty much exclusively worked with early stage tech startups, helping founders, mostly technical founders who have a great product, figure out how to find customers or how to find investors. So I did that for a while. I had my own couple startups, recently left the last one because of lockdown in Canada, moved down here to Texas. And so I took a bit of time off to really think about, okay, like I really love working in the startup ecosystem. probably having my own startup, not the best option right now. I think I had a bit of burnout. I think my wife had a bit of burnout from me having a startup for it was about 5 years at that point, of being an entrepreneur. So I wanted to go back to helping founders, and I figured the best thing would be probably work in VC. And so, as Christy said, I came on LinkedIn. I was actually working with a career coach who suggested I get on LinkedIn, and not just apply to jobs or find people, but actually start putting out content and seeing who it resonates with. So get on LinkedIn as a content creator, as a job seeking strategy. And what I found was there was very few roles out there that actually aligned with me. And so I thought, I would find a job where I could work with founders and help them. And really all it was, here's a fund, here's your mandate, go out there and find founders that fit this mold, invest in them, and make us some money. And so none of that, I couldn't really find a company that I jived with. And at the same time, what I found was, I was putting on more of a face to try to fit into this mold that is so prevalent in the startup ecosystem. And it's a very VC centric kind of culture where, because VCs are putting all this money into the startup ecosystem, they kind of call the shots and they redirect everyone's efforts towards companies that fit their model. And it's actually a very small percentage. I would say 90% of the companies that I've worked with personally in the past are not a good fit for venture capital. And so that's the very high growth, high risk model that actually earns them, it's the swing for the fences model, where most companies will fail, and one may, return your entire fund. So I didn't really, that didn't really, it didn't sit well with me, and it never really sat well with me, but I couldn't put my finger on it. And so when I came on LinkedIn, I actually was able to connect with other founders. I started putting content out. I started gravitating more towards speaking my mind versus saying what I think people want me to say, or what will appeal to others. And what I found was I got a lot of pushback, but at the same time, I got a lot of support. The support was actually less than the pushback, but I felt like I was onto something here. And so I just kind of doubled down on that. And I just, communicated my true thoughts about the issues in the startup ecosystem, why founders are not getting funded, why founders are even trying to get funded in the first place if they're not a good fit for VC. And it just kind of, it took off from there. So now I run NTVC. I have an incubator for bootstrap founders, and I'm working on a course for how founders can get their first check in 30 days using LinkedIn.
Dang, that's so awesome. I love everything about what you just said. And it's interesting because as soon as you start getting pushback, and I totally believe this, it means you're doing something right, because people don't like change, especially a shakeup. And I'm curious to know, because, same, I've worked with a lot of founders, and every single one of them thinks they're a fit for VC. And it's always like, they're missing out because they don't know my thing very well, whatever it is, their product and or service. What do you see working with these founders is their biggest reason why they're not a fit in this space to get VC?
I would say most of the time they think that if they have a really good idea or they're onto something, they think that they are investable. But what it means, so it's not really, and so they look at the merit. They look at the merit of their company and whether they think they have a good product or they have good reviews or it's a large market. That's not the criteria for being a fit for VC. The criteria for being a fit for VC is the fund has a mandate. They need to return, let's say on average 5 to 7 years, they have to return the money to the investor, to their investors. And so say they invest in 10 companies out of the fund, they're going to write off maybe about half of them. Maybe 2 will do okay, but not really, make much money. And 1 out of that 10 is really going to return, the 10, 100, 1,000 times that fund needs to pay its investors back. And so that's really the criteria. Are you very high risk? But can you potentially return our entire fund with this one bet? And most companies don't fit that model. Most companies don't plan to grow that fast in such a short period of time. It's quite counterintuitive to founders to really try to understand this model. For them, they focus on the passion, their industry expertise, and they have a vision for the future that they want to see with their company. It's not just about financial returns in a short period of time. So I think that's the major discrepancy, is that founders have a totally different criteria to evaluate the credentials of their startup compared to investors.
Yeah,
So
and
I'm interrupting.
Go
So
ahead.
Leslie wants to know, again, it's only
Oh,
questions.
yeah.
Are you familiar with the Council for Entrepreneurial Developers?
I'm not. I haven't heard of them before.
Okay. Go on.
You share. No worries. So just kind of going off of what you were just saying, Saleem, because I think a lot of founders too, and I won't say all of them, but some of them, they get so stuck on their product and or service as they envision it that they have a difficulty adjusting as well. I think is another, problem that some do have. But what I want to dig in a little bit more is talking about what the whole thing of, guaranteed to get a check within 30 days. If you want to talk a little bit more about that, and then definitely let's get into your program of what you're offering, your weekly calls, your et cetera. So there's a couple of things to follow up on for you.
Sure. So the course I'm working on right now is called First Check. And it was really designed because I had been preaching for a very long time. Founders do not need funding. You need a customer, you need traction, you need to validate your business model, you need feedback. There's a lot of iteration required before you are at a stage where you're a good fit for funding and where investors will actually, entertain you. And so despite my efforts, there still is a lot of what I would call propaganda in the startup ecosystem that, the first thing that comes to mind when a founder has a great idea is make a pitch deck and go and start pitching investors.
Yes.
I was guilty of that myself. Most people I know were guilty of that as a first-time founder. And I think it comes from, you hear the 1 in a million success story of, a founder that raised off their deck, and you think that's the way that it's done. So, I quickly realized, this doesn't really apply to everyone. And so I wanted to highlight other forms of capitalization for founders, whether it's revenue-based. That's what my incubator was focused on, for bootstrap founders who just needed to generate revenue and get into market. There's non-dilutive, so there's grants, and debt financing. And even if you do take dilutive financing, there are other options other than VC. So there's angels, there's family offices, there's industry execs who become angels because they want to advise you and they really like what you're doing and they want to support you financially. So despite me, preaching this message that you don't need funding, founders were still coming to me with requests to help them with funding. Can you help me? Can you find me investors? And my personal network is quite limited in terms of investors that I would actually recommend to people. So I used to, I was a founder twice, and so I fundraised for my own companies. I used to work in venture capital selling to VC. So my network was quite broad, but there was very few people I'd actually recommend to work with. And so the first few founders that came to me, I'd be like, yeah, you know what, this guy's kind of active in your space, but I've worked with them in the past and I actually would not recommend you working with them. And I was going through my LinkedIn, going through all my business cards, and there were very few investors that I would actually recommend that founders work with.
But that shows your character, because when we might know somebody, but if we recommend somebody and it's just not going to work, it's going to fall back on you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And a lot of people don't follow that rule. They're like, oh yeah, I'll recommend. And then they walk away and they don't realize it's going to fall back on you if it doesn't work out, because then they're going to blame you. It's all your fault. And then they tend to forget that they asked.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's entirely tied to your reputation. for when
Yeah.
you make a recommendation or referral. And so I quickly realized, I'm not going to be able to really make many intros. They're just like, and a lot of the founders were underrepresented, or they were in a niche kind of industry where there just wasn't a lot of active investors that I knew. And so the requests kept coming in, and even if after I vetted them, and even if after I realized these are actually a good fit for finding investors, I didn't really have any way to help them, and I wasn't going to go down the avenue of starting my own fund. I think that would just be, at this point, it would just be recreating the same issues that VCs have, because then I'd be chasing that return to return the fund. So that was not an option. So I started looking at what other strategies there are for founders that need funding and can't find it from the institutional sources out there. And so it kind of just organically arose from founders I previously worked with through the incubator or one-on-one, where I developed a method where you use LinkedIn in terms of communicating your message, putting it out there, and seeing who responds to that. And based on the people that respond, that is now your shortlist. That's your tribe of people who are dedicated to your mission. And the key thing in all this, it's not just about building a personal brand. It's about baking your startup's mission into your brand, such that you and your mission become intertwined. They're one and the same. You don't really differentiate. So anytime someone thinks about Saleem, they think about anti-VC, and they know what I'm about, and they know what I do. And so it's about baking that into your brand, and then communicating it across. And LinkedIn has so many opportunities. You can put posts out, you can comment on other people's posts, you can send connection requests. But the whole point is that when your brand is aligned and it communicates what you actually do as a founder and what you want to accomplish, it will resonate with the people that you want it to resonate with. So it'll attract the people you want it to attract, and it'll repel the people that you want it to repel. And even if you repel 90% of the people that are on LinkedIn, that's fine. That's still 10%. That's still, there's almost 1 billion users on LinkedIn now. That's more than enough for you to work with. And so the goal really is like build a community of people who are passionate about what you want to do. And the unique thing about founders is that they're all mission driven. They all have some reason as to why they started the company that they started. And so if you can communicate that reason, you will start growing a tribe of loyal supporters around your brand. And you can tap that tribe for referrals, for investment, for interest to customers, interest to investors, mentors, employees, like whatever you need human capital for, you can find that as long as you build that tribe first. So that's what the course is structured around.
So Jeff, and you might have gone, what was your business plan like? Because you've been, as you said, you've been a few startups, but now going into this is obviously it's a different business plan. But so how do you go about how, I'm assuming he's making the question of how is your business plan different from being a startup, from what you do now?
I don't think I had a business plan when I started.
Yeah.
I was a job seeker. I could not find a job that I aligned with. And then I just started putting content out, helping founders, and I got requests of founders who wanted to work with me on a one-on-one consulting basis. I started with that. I grew it to an incubator where I just charged a low flat fee, so there's no equity. And now I do courses where I charge a fee for founders. And that's really, I mean, the percentage of founders I work with on a paid basis is tiny. Compared to the founders I help out with no cost required. And so I do weekly calls, which I've been doing for about on and off for about 6 months now. I'm more consistent with them now, where we just tackle a topic. People want to know, how do I fundraise? How do I find early revenue? How do I make a pitch deck? Like just the basic questions that founders have. There's no real, I would say that it's good advice in the startup ecosystem, unbiased advice. Yeah. So a lot of the loudest voices are usually VCs or people with a stake in the startup ecosystem. So large accelerators or large investors. And so the advice they give is going to be geared towards their framework and how to, it's not going to be, how do I get, when someone asks, how do I get capital? They're going to think, okay, how do you get a check from me? Here's all the things you need to do. And whether that's relevant to them or not is not really accounted for.
Yeah. And why don't you, as far as that weekly call goes, when is that? Who can be involved, and how does that work?
So it is now. It used to be on Saturdays, but I got a lot of feedback that Saturday was bad, so I moved it to Mondays. It's currently at 11 a.m. Central U.S. time, and to join, any founder can join. To join, the best way is my newsletter. So we can share the link to that after.
Yeah, we'll definitely share all the links in the comments and when we do any of the replays as well. So I just think that's a great thing for people to check out.
So if somebody thinks they're got a startup and they're a founder and they connect with you and they want to be on this call, however, they're really not what they really think they are, how do you go about saying, you know, you're sort of wasting your time? And, you know, how do you
that's a really good question. So I used to be really polite about it and try to like dance around it. Then I went through, then I tried just being blunt and like just telling them to it as it is. I don't think either of those were particularly effective. So now I think learning through osmosis and being in touch with other founders is probably the best way, because they will get a variety of feedback from a variety of different sources.
Cool.
And then it's really on them to kind of collate that in their mind, and they will see themes that come through. So for example, you know, if they're selling to a market that doesn't exist yet or that it's dying, people are going to tell them that. So I think it's more effective for other people to tell them versus me trying to like break the bad news in one session. But it's something and honestly, I think peer support is something that's really missing in the startup ecosystem. And that's really what I'm trying to do with the community that I'm building, is have founders help founders. Because when you take advice from someone who hasn't been through it themselves, and a lot of VCs have not been through it themselves, they don't really understand the struggle and what founders actually go through. So I believe that founders are the best source of peer support. And if you can find someone who's one step ahead of you or someone who's in a similar industry, their advice to you is probably going to be the best advice that you can get for your company.
Oh, amen. I kind of want to go back on a little bit of thing, just to reiterate the fact of what Jeff was asking about the business plan is and this also goes in connection with Christy's good question. Is I
don't know business.
So many people during particularly the last 3 years, almost 4 now, have what, and I refer myself to this as an accidental consultant. Because like you were saying, I was laid off at the beginning of 2020 as a marketing executive, and nobody was hiring a CMO or an executive in a marketing position in capital markets or private equity at that time, or let alone any other industry, because they were making a lot of changes and cuts and et cetera. So in order to survive, I mean, because we got to do what we got to do, it was like, well, I need to just get some work. And thankfully, some people had reached out to me saying, hey, I know that you've been in this space. I'm an advisor that needs some help with some communications or whatever it is. And I just started doing work because I needed a paycheck and creating the work. And so I think the beauty of what you're doing is, and what you've done and are continuing to do, is showing the fact of, hey, I was in this place where it wasn't aligning with me personally. I couldn't find a really good fit. But the more I started looking, it just kind of evolved into something, and you're creating this business, this solution, and shaking things up, which is great. And I will say that is something in a horrendous business market, which it is. It does give opportunity for a lot of people to, like yourself, to be innovative and bring new things to the forefront. Because I think this approach of having community in the way that you do, because I can say I've seen other founders, working together, but the ones that I've seen in the past, quite honestly, were more like, none of y'all know what you're talking about. So it's just like a waste of time, because everybody's going, well, this is the way this works. And it's like, well, actually, no. But I love what you're doing, and with this weekly call, of course, in the newsletter, And I do encourage anyone, and like I said, we'll share all the links to connect with definitely with Saleem, but definitely check out his newsletter. And if the call applies to you, please definitely go to the call. And now to move forward with the conversation with you, Saleem, is I wanted to talk about what are your visions of where you see this all going for yourself, in the sense of where do you want your business to grow to, and where do you see it going, and what your wants, hopes, dreams sort of situation is.
To me, if I had to sum up my vision, it would be seeing no founder get left behind. Because right now, you see a lot of founders who are just isolated from the startup ecosystem because they don't fit the mold, that celebrity entrepreneur mold that everyone is kind of looking for. And so you see that with lack of funding to underrepresented entrepreneurs. You see that with the general. It's hard for example, I've spoken with female founders who ask their husband or find a male counterpart just to pitch to investors, or someone older to pitch to investors, because they get a better response that way. And they're actually like training that person on the technology and what they're building. And so it's just it's a really sad state of affairs. And I would actually say, from on a numbers basis, so most of my network is in Canada and the US, but from a numbers basis, most founders that reach out to me are from places like South America, Africa, Asia, East Asia, and they don't have access to any resources. A lot of them don't know any other founders, and they just happen to come across my LinkedIn profile, and I'm one of the only few people that are actually talking about these kind of subjects. So for me, it's really some of these founders, some of the highest potential founders I've ever met, because the amount of grit that you have to have, and discipline and work ethic to get to where they are without any support and without any guidance from anyone, it's really amazing. And so if you're able to support these types of founders with basic resources, the stuff we take for granted, if you went to a Western university, if you live in a large city, there is support. There's government resources. There's tons of help for you as a founder. If you give them basic resources, they're able to do 10 times what one of us as privileged founders are able to do. So I think that from a social perspective, it is the highest impact that you can have by providing basic standard resources to founders, unbiased resources, but also from a financial perspective, the growth in those companies in a short period of time with very little input is massive, because these founders are already they're already bootstrapped, they're already gritty, they know how to do a lot with very little. So for me, it's really, sum it up, it's growing this community to a point where every founder feels like they have a place, and they're able to access the resources unbiased, and get a variety of opinions from other people that have done it. So it's really a community of founders supporting each other, which is what I'm building.
Which I think what is great is the ego's not popping out.
Yeah,
it's not all about I'm a VC. It's all about not you. I mean, you, as you said, you don't want anybody left behind. And there's so many people that you have the ability to help them, with the information that they would have never been able to do, because somebody's ego it's about them, even though they're trying to help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And unfortunately, you do see that a lot in the ecosystem right now.
Well, pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, but truth is, especially in that space, for sure, there is no doubt. And maybe to back up a little bit, or because talking about a pitch deck is one of those things, and like I absolutely loved that, like some of your content right away, and that was one of the posts I made this morning because it resonates with me like so massively, is about, people, get rid of your stupid pitch deck. But of course, we understand that a pitch deck is in fact needed in a lot of cases. What do you see as some of the biggest mistakes that people make with their pitch deck?
So I think the pitch deck is really an antiquated tool. I don't think it has much of a role in the fundraising process anymore, or even just generally in the startup building process. I think it was like maybe a cool thing back in the 90s when PowerPoint was invented and you had like the checkerboard transition and people were adding sound effects and stuff to it.
Yeah.
I think it was a novelty back then.
That's
And all
nice.
those presentations were given in person. So as a tool to kind of support an in-person presentation, yeah, okay, maybe I can understand that. But now in the digital age where everyone's meeting on Zoom, and there's not as much face-to-face, the deck does not convey it doesn't convey the stuff you need it to convey. When you're looking at an investor, especially early stage, you don't have much metrics. You don't have much traction. All you have is an idea. Doesn't matter if you have an MVP, doesn't matter if you have a paying customer. Like those metrics are not representative of the larger picture. There's a million things that can happen wrong between the state you're at today and the picture that you're painting. And so really what you have, all you have is your credibility as a founder. And so that's your passion, your vision, and your sector expertise. Those three things are what you have. Those are very difficult. It's difficult to use to convey those in a deck, because a deck is a very cold, kind of calculated tool of communication where you're talking about your startup. This is what we do and this is what we've done. You're not going to be able to build trust or convey your personality through that. And at this stage for early stage founders, you want the investor to like you as a founder and like the big picture on what you're working on, and think that you actually are the guy or the person to work on this big picture. None of that's communicated through a deck. You send a cold deck as an intro, you'll probably have like a 0.1% chance of a response from that. And yet founders keep spamming investors with their deck. They buy email lists of investors, and so those I've met with VCs that get 100 emails a day, 100 cold emails a day. What are they going to do with 100 cold emails? Are they even going to be able to read them all? And even if they do read them, after I used to read a lot of decks. After about 4 or 5, they all blend together. Every company is the same. They're all doing some big, amazing thing, and their team is like qualified. And look at how great we are. That's basically every deck. And so to stand out at the earliest stage, it's not about your startup, it's about you. And so you need a better way to convey that. I recommend using LinkedIn to curate and communicate your personal brand, because that will build that trust, that element of trust, where an investor feels like they actually know who you are because you've communicated a broad kind of dissection of yourself versus just talking about your startup. So most of fundraising is network building to establish that trust element outside of your startup. It has nothing to do with your startup. Then once you drive with the investor, then you can say, oh, by the way, here's my startup and here's what I'm working on. And if you already have that relationship, they're going to be a lot more responsive to it.
Amen. I just want to reiterate the fact, because it's actually, I find it so humorous when you're like, it was great in the 1990s when you were using your PowerPoint with the transitions and the effects and stuff. Updating it to a keynote does not make it new and innovative.
No.
Like, stop it. Like, stop the pitch slap. I mean, like, in so many ways, I think that is such an important lesson for so many people, because they're so stuck on the way of, they think like that's how it's always been done. And it's like, but it's so ineffective, exactly like you just said. So, I mean, I found that quite humorous, but extremely helpful. I mean, that is something I think that a lot of people can relate to, unfortunately. And I think you bring up the fact about LinkedIn, of course. I don't know, do a LinkedIn Live about what you do. And like you said, the whole point is, and this is with any business, whatever it is, people invest in you as the human being. It has nothing really to do with I mean, granted, it does have something to do with your business plan, but you can have the raddest business plan or, exit strategy or all of those things in place and be, in high margins and all the things that somebody wants to invest in. But if you're an ass, like, most likely it better be an extremely incredible, high risk, high return opportunity for them to want to do it. Otherwise, they're looking into who the human being is that's behind it, that they can, that they can trust. I mean, because when you're talking money, trust, regardless, has to be involved on some level. And because there are so many opportunities, it is easy for them to just move on to the next. Because like you said, they're getting 100 in their inbox every day, which is ridiculous. But it just shows the fact that there's so many opportunities for them. They don't need yours if they don't have an understanding of who you are. And again, I think so important. And you even explaining early on that you've just been on LinkedIn for a year and a half, and how that has changed how you view business and how you're doing things. Because a lot of people are coming back who are now maybe founders or thinking about being founders or having a startup, but not really knowing what to do on LinkedIn. So as a considered newbie, which I would say a year and a half is very much a newbie, but you're doing incredible things here. What would you say are some great lessons that you've learned along the way that you could share also with the audience about the power of LinkedIn?
He just went mute.
Yeah.
He went mute. You went mute. Can't hear you. You can. Pop off and pop back on.
Yeah, if it's not your microphone being muted.
Yeah, there you go. Anyway.
Hey.
But we've got some people that follow him.
Let's acknowledge some folks.
And I love this. While we're seeing a professional Saleem, he's professional. He just, what I like about Saleem? He's him. He does not apologize. Okay, can we talk? Can you talk?
Are we better now?
Yeah, we're good. We're good. We're good.
Connection. Okay, so LinkedIn, the power of LinkedIn. I think the power of LinkedIn is really the network. People underestimate it as a social platform. There is almost 1 billion users, and those users, it's unlike other social platforms because those people are all on LinkedIn for one reason, which is to further their professional opportunities. And so that itself as a criteria is going to eliminate a lot of the people it's going to eliminate a lot of the noise and the people that are going to waste your time. So by default, anyone you need to help build your business, or even as a job seeker, or even as like a salesperson, anyone who is in a position to help you is going to have a LinkedIn profile. Now, whether they're active or not, whether you can find them or not, that's up to how you do it. But they are going to be on LinkedIn by default. Almost everyone I know who has a job, who went to university, who is of some sort of like professional use has a LinkedIn profile. So the pool of people, it's very large, and there is a minimum kind of requirement to get into LinkedIn. So it's a good place to start. I think where people kind of get lost is they come on when they are looking for a job, or they come on with a very specific goal in mind, and they get pushed away by the average quality of content or engagements that are on here. So most of the feed is dominated by really large content creators who probably don't put out the most useful content for most people. And so if you're starting, and the same thing happened to me when I job searched prior to last year. I never took LinkedIn seriously in terms of being able to build a brand and really leverage it. And so I think if you can overcome that initial hurdle, which is, I don't think this platform's for me because most of the content on here is kind of irrelevant, and you spend time following people that are in your industry, curating your feed, connecting with other like-minded people, and communicating your brand, which kind of closes the loop. So the more you communicate the more other people resonate with you, and the more of their content you see, and the better quality relationships you build, and the more of their network you tapped in. It becomes a flywheel. So if you can actually get the flywheel going, you'd actually be amazed at the people that you can meet, regardless of your industry, regardless of your geography. I think one of the one of the best aspects of LinkedIn is that it doesn't matter where you live. Like, everybody has access, and it's free. It's a tool that every founder, every job seeker in the world can use. And so I think that's why I found a lot of really good underserved founders on LinkedIn, because it's their only tool for connecting with other professionals or mentors that may be able to help them on their journey. So I think if you can overcome the initial, I guess, culture shock when you first come on here, and you spend a bit of time curating your experience, you would probably be amazed with the results that you can achieve. Also, one caveat is you have to not care what other people think about you and what you're doing.
Amen.
So what I share, yeah, you just can't care.
Yes.
So what I share with people, your LinkedIn page is yours. That's your business. That's your brand.
Right.
It's your page.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can, if you want to say who,
you're
quirky or whatever, that's your page. You're letting people know.
Yeah.
And as you, and Saleem, you were saying, the connections. I mean, I connected with you. I mean, we're connected to people over on the other side of the pond that, we become, you become friends with. You might never even meet them. Kelle and I met on LinkedIn 15 years ago. But even with business, founders, job seekers, I always tell people when I'm helping them out with their job seeking, if you see me commenting on things, go to that person's page.
Yeah.
I said, because I'm connected to them for a reason, and I'm learning from them. Yeah. I mean, and I'm getting to know them. And that's the whole thing about networking. You never know who somebody knows that needs to know you, or vice versa. Yeah. And to go to Jeff's cute, quirky little comment, this is the first time that Christy has ever been very quiet, because I know the business. You talk about jobs, you talk about ATF, FBI, all that stuff.
LinkedIn profiles.
I can talk it. This, I'm intrigued about it, hence why it's here. But for the first time, I'm actually learning instead of knowing. So that's your answer, Jeff.
Jeff, you're awesome. And to keep this kind of in the LinkedIn thing, but then to definitely link this with you, Saleem, is how do you recommend that people, because one of the issues obviously is them not having quality or knowing how to connect with investors. How have you gone about that, or what kind of tips would you have to offer on that?
If they're starting off on LinkedIn?
Mm-hmm. Or even if they're just trying to now say, like, I'm going to go and I have a startup in mind, I want to do this thing, and I don't have investors in my network, as an example.
Gotcha. So I would say you don't start with investors. Investors is really the last step. What you need to do is find like-minded people. When I say like-minded, I mean people that understand what you're doing, and they understand your vision as a founder. And they agree, want to support you on that path. Those people will give you advice. They'll intro you to investors. They will, the quality of feedback you get from someone who gets you and what they're working on is going to be better than, if you get it from some random expert who, knows about the industry. And that's where you start. You don't start with investors. Founders always think, to get a check, I got to go start pitching investors. You got to talk to people that are part of your tribe. You got to build that tribe first. And it doesn't need to take long. You don't need you don't need thousands of people. You can just have a few people that really get what you're doing. And maybe they have a bigger network. Maybe you start networking with the people that they know. But you got to start somewhere. And I think that the starting point is communicate. You bake this into your elevator pitch, which is, this is what I'm working on, and this is why I'm working on it. The why is the key part. Put that all throughout your headline, your profile, everywhere, and you'll find people will reach out to you who align with that.
I love that. And I honestly, I feel like, and I think Christy and I were saying this to you yesterday, like, I feel a LinkedIn Live with founders and highlighting founders and having these conversations would also be like incredibly beneficial for so many people. I mean, your weekly call, I mean, so many things that you're doing are so great and such an awesome resource for so many, your content. Again, I encourage everyone, if you're not already connected, do go connect with Saleem and follow his content, because your content is freaking fantastic. I nerd out over it and I'm like, yes, I love seeing a little shakeup. Um, so I guess now, kind of as we're sort of winding up here, is what is it that we can do to help you and or the audience, or what kind of things, I shouldn't say what kind of things, what can we do to help you and help you continue to grow your business and get the word out about helping other founders, etc.
I love meeting new founders and just listening to what they're working on. So any founders, please send them my way. It's tough to do it at scale. I used to do, I used to open my calendar up for founder calls, and then it kind of got jammed up really quickly the last time I did that. So I'm trying to find ways that I can do it on a one-to-many kind of basis. So the weekly calls really help. I like to, assign tasks to founders and see how they do with it after those calls, kind of as a follow-up. So what's useful is getting feedback from those founders that I work with.
Yeah.
So send founders my way. I will give them something to do that I think will help them on their journey. If they do it and come back to me with, this worked and this didn't work, it just helps me refine my material so that I'm able to offer it to other founders. And so it's just a whole bunch of iteration.
Yeah. And maybe if you could just highlight at least a little bit, because, I said this right away when we were talking about how whenever you see something that talks about, a time limit on when you can guarantee funds, a 30-day to the check your program, just kind of give a little bit of a broader idea of what that looks like, because that's more about working with the founder and not just like, hey, if you sign up, you're going to get a check in 30 days. Like, you actually have to do something.
Right. So I haven't really publicized that course yet, because I'm still with the beta cohort. But the idea behind it is using LinkedIn to fundraise. So refining your elevator pitch so that it bakes in your why, getting that, putting that throughout your profile, all your communications, very aligned with your pitch, and then getting that in front of as many people as possible. And the ones that come to the surface, those are the people you spend time on to nurture those relationships. So I've done this with a few founders. It started accidentally as part of the incubator. And what I found is that I haven't had a founder that hasn't gotten at least a 25K check in the first month, who actually follows the method and puts in the work. And so my course is around, getting your first check in 30 days. And I do offer a guarantee that if you don't get at least a 25K check, that I will work with you one-on-one until you do. And so nobody's taken me up on that offer yet. I'm still pretty selective with who I work with, because I want to make sure that they're actually going to get the results if they sign up. So a lot of it has to do with, like, obviously you need a good idea, and in a market that people are interested in. But most of it is that you're just willing to put in the work. People who are willing to put in the work see results. And so I think that's the main kind of criteria I look for when I work with founders on that basis.
So just to put the emphasis on that, people, it would be something that you would never be able to just say, I signed up and it was guaranteed. Like, you actually do have to do the work. and I think that just goes to reiterate with any founder, any job seeker, anyone on LinkedIn, things don't happen just by you being here. Like, you actually do have to do things to make the ball move. And I think that's so important. But Christy, do you have anything that you want to add before that we move on? Or is there any comments that we need to, or questions that we have?
The infamous Luke Matthews is here.
Hey.
I don't know if anybody knows who Luke Matthews is, but he's infamous.
I appreciate him
So
coming and showing his support.
absolutely, absolutely. No, I mean, this is, as I said, this is not a area that I'm familiar with. I don't do
I love it
Excel,
being a
and
learning one for
2
you.
+ 2 = 8, so I don't do math. So this is very. I'm very interested in this but I also love how you work with people and how you're saying, "Hey, I'm going to show you, but you have to work this." It's not going to, and it's not easy.
Right.
I mean, people think, we're in a time that people want easy. And it's not, life is not easy. If you want something bad enough, you've got to put in the sweat and the dirt and all that stuff. So no, I'm just sitting back listening.
I love it.
This is YouTube gig.
Love it. I totally do. And I think
Kelly's nerding out, so
yeah,
she's
I totally
ecstatic.
am. I dig it so much. But I think the other part of it that's so beautiful is you're showing people how, like, this didn't exist. You went down this path and it's organically happened simply because you were looking for work and things weren't happening the way you want. And then you saw opportunity and were like, well, hey, I'm going to take a look at this. And the authentic way that it has happened, and that you connected with Christy because you were a job seeker. And the connector there is too talking about.
We didn't connect that way.
Oh, I thought you did.
We connected after. No.
Retract.
Never connected to him. No. We connect because Stephanie and Luke and Brock and those guys make me laugh. So
yes. So
and I would see him, and so I connected with him.
Oh, okay.
No, it had nothing to do with jobs.
See, look at the power of a connection. And then now here he is sharing, the great things that he's doing. And then to link it back to LinkedIn, because that's where Saleem is using his, or being the source for his business and to grow his business, which I think is so incredible for everyone else to hear, that is the power of LinkedIn. And especially he's only been on for a year and a half. And that does link back to Christy, is having a powerful LinkedIn profile. Make sure that you have someone like Christy check out your profile and help you with it, because that is so important. I see people out there currently that claim that they are, you can take their course to redo your LinkedIn profile, and they themselves don't even have it optimized, but that's a different show. I do want to get back to, as we do wrap up, because we're coming up on the top of the hour here, Saleem, is just kind of to go, how can people obviously connect with you on LinkedIn? And just what you want to leave people thinking about. And and I guess in just reiterating your coursework and what you've got coming up and anything else that we can do to help you, man. I mean, this has been awesome.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think the only thing I haven't really kind of stressed is how much work it is to be a founder, and there are no shortcuts, and anyone promising you a shortcut probably is scamming you. And so just to give you an idea, the 30 days is not me doing the work for you. The 30 days it's a very intensive 30 days. Too intense for most people that I initially tried it out with. So I actually had to like soften the curriculum a bit to make it more palatable. And the amount of work that I've spent on this business to get it to where it is, it's been probably about 350 conversations with founders one-on-one. To get feedback and to really understand the challenges they face. I've probably reviewed 400 decks, and that's on top of the conversations. So, and then I stopped doing deck reviews because I realized the problem wasn't the deck; it was these other issues. So it is an immense amount of work, and you have to really want it to be able to achieve great things. And if you choose to go down the entrepreneur journey, it's a path. It's a very thankless job. It has a low rate of success, and it's an immense amount of work. But people do it because they're so passionate about that one thing, solving that one problem, that it keeps them up at night. And so you have to really just, you have to keep yourself motivated. You have to keep the end goal in mind, and you can't be afraid of doing work. You can't be looking for shortcuts.
Love it. Christy, do you have any final thoughts, my dear?
No, Got nothing.
Awesome.
No, again, I'm just taking in
I love
the
it.
information.
I love
Yeah,
it. Love it. Love
yeah.
it. Love it.
I'm quiet for once, but no, it's making me understand a different level of founders and startups, because I've never worked for a startup, and I've never really been around a startup. You know, I've had my own businesses, but those aren't the level that you work with. But so no, and what I think that Saleem, what you offer and what you're doing is not only so unique, it's very giving.
Yes.
You know, you're wanting to help other people, and that's what we're all about.
Yeah.
You know,
Amen.
helping other people.
Yeah.
So that's all I got.
Yeah. So yeah, he had me especially when you said the no founder left behind. I was like, yeah, explanation point on the fact that I already dug you. I love that, because it is coming genuinely from a place, and so organically grew from a place of how can I help more people do better. And I think that's fantastic. And the world needs more of you, Saleem, particularly in this space. And I am a fan of the anti-VC 100%. Everybody needs to go check out Saleem's page. If this is something that resonates with you as a founder, I highly recommend that you get his newsletter and join his weekly calls. And then we will share, again, all of the links in the comments. If you have any follow-up questions, do go ahead and put them in the comments, or reach out to Saleem or Christy and I directly, and we will be happy to answer those as well. So again, Saleem, we're so grateful to have had your time today and to be able to spotlight you, because, man, you're doing great things, and we wish you nothing but success. And continue to go out and help as many founders, because I have a feeling you are going to make an amazing impact in this space. So with all that being said, thank you everyone for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next Tuesday at 1:11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're all on this journey together, and together we do make it awesome.